Hey, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening from Israel. Good afternoon if you're in the States. I'm not really tracking where everyone's logging in from, but you can certainly type those and share that in the Q&A section so we know where you are. Yeah, Dave, some bad weather. We're going to wait just another minute. There we are, that's me. We're going to wait just another minute to give a couple of more people the opportunity to come in. Definitely tell us where you're coming in from, but please use the Q&A section, folks. If you can, it's at the bottom. Should be at the bottom of your screen, and that's where we're going to be able to see you the best. Kelvin in Atlanta. Priscilla, welcome. Welcome, everybody. So this is great. We've got a bunch of people logging in still. Oh, thank you, Elliot, for telling people that I'm a bit blurry. I don't know what I can do about that. So we're going to get started, and I look forward to other people joining the conversation. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Sorry if I am blurry. I appreciate that that heads up. It's Jonathan Feldstein. I'm technically not in Jerusalem, by full disclosure, but I'm in Israel and sending you greetings from Israel, and so thrilled that you're all here. I have the privilege of serving as the president and CEO of the Genesis 123 Foundation. And for those of you who are not yet familiar, our mission is very simple. We aspire to create new, unique, and meaningful programs to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel. And we've been very successful at building up lots of them, and something that the Deputy Mayor and I have spoken about more than a few times, and unfortunately some of them have had the rug pulled out from under us, and we're not here to talk about all those programs, but certainly feel free to visit our website, genesis123.co. But I want to emphasize before we begin the formal program that when we talk about building bridges, we want Jews and Christians to interact together. We want everyone to approach those things that unite us, the God of Israel and the land and the people and the state of Israel, each from his and her own respective tradition. And we honor that and respect that, and it involves a lot of learning and a lot of grace. We're actually, speaking of welcoming, I'm not able to keep up with who all is logged on and from where, but we have people from 9 countries tonight, including Korea, Australia, Malaysia and Pakistan, Nigeria and Tanzania, Finland and Norway, South Africa, and of course the US. And I may have forgotten somebody. If I did, please forgive me. I also do want to thank especially our sponsors of this program with us, with the Genesis 123 Foundation tonight. That's the Atlanta Israel Coalition, the East Texas Biblical Prophecy Forum, and Dr. Ron Beals, who's with us, and Host Ministries, and our good friend and board member, Pastor Linda Chandler. Without further ado, you're not here to speak, to hear me speak so much tonight, but rather our special guest, the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Fleur Hassan-Nahoum. She grew up, by way of introduction, she grew up in Gibraltar and studied law at King's College in London, where she practiced law for an extended period, but also served with a tremendous organization, the World Jewish Relief, where she also had the privilege, even though despite the name, she worked with Jews and Christians around the world. In 2001, she and her family moved to Israel. For those of you familiar with the term, That means she made Aliyah. And afterwards, she worked for the JDC, one of Israel's largest and the Jewish people's most long-term global Jewish relief organizations. She entered politics here in Jerusalem in 2010 and was elected to Jerusalem City Council in 2018. I can say many sincere and wonderful and effusive things about the privilege I've had to get to know her over the last couple of years and work together and know her support of what we're doing and in the building bridges. But you're going to get to hear that now a little bit firsthand yourself, but know that as deputy mayor, she not only has the portfolio regarding tourism, working with other countries in terms of their diplomatic efforts, and hopefully we'll talk about that, moving their embassies to Jerusalem, working with marginalized populations here, ultra-Orthodox women, Ethiopian immigrants, and certainly Jerusalem's Arab population. She has a very broad worldview, pluralistic. Oh, and I neglected to mention, and it should be intuitive, but it's important to state the inclusion of women in all levels of politics and civil affairs. So I'm just thrilled. I think that I can't wait for the opportunity to vote for her as prime minister, or at least high enough to become foreign minister. And without further ado, let me welcome my friend, Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Fleur Hassan-Nahoum.
Hi, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here. And it's such an honor to be with people from all over the world. If there's one good thing that has come out from the recent period when we're all stuck without traveling, is that we can still make connections and very meaningful connections in this way. So thank you for organizing this, Jonathan and Linda, and everybody else involved.
Great. Well, let's start off with some questions. By the way, folks, what I neglected to mention, our intent, you don't have to log off early because you think it's getting boring. Our intent is to be done in 36 minutes, a little bit half past the hour in whatever time zone you're in. So stick with us. We're going to try and keep this lively and interesting. Fleur, this week we observe the commemoration, not a holiday, but the commemoration of Tisha B'Av, the 9th of the Hebrew Av, on which we mourn the destruction of not just the Second Temple, but the First Temple and many other calamities that befell the Jewish people. For you personally, and for you as deputy mayor, what does that mean to you? What does it mean for Jews and Christians united together in support of Israel? And what does it mean when we talk about rebuilding Jerusalem?
As you mentioned, Jonathan, this is a solemn week for us Jews. And you know, what's even more, I guess, poignant from this whole week and from the destruction of the two temples is that it's written very clearly in the scriptures that the temples were not destroyed because of a foreign enemy. The temples were destroyed because of our own issues with each other. We were divided. We were not generous, and we were cruel to one another. We split into subgroups, and this is the reason why the temples were destroyed. I believe that unity is a very important thing. Even when you disagree with somebody, you can still respect somebody, and there's a line that you should never cross. And I think that that period of that kind of division between people was very toxic. And what we should be learning is that wherever you come from, whoever you support, whatever political ideology you have, the most important thing is to just be a decent person to your neighbor. And I think that's what I think about in this week. Just try and be a decent human being, and everything comes second. And in terms of rebuilding Jerusalem, well, this is an ongoing task. I'm not sure that our job will ever be done because, you know, we physically built Jerusalem. We physically keep building Jerusalem. We united the city, thankfully, in 1967. We have a city in normal times with almost 5 million visitors every year. We have, you know, we're blessed with friends all over the world, especially the evangelical community. But we're not finished. We have to make sure that all minorities are given opportunity. We have to ensure that people can actually reach their potential. We have to make sure that our education system is the best that it can be in order to give all children opportunity. We have to get rid of we still have anti-Semitism in this city with a lot of the more radical Arab Palestinian groups that are poisoning the minds of young children. We have to annihilate any type of baseless hatred, which is what the scriptures talk about in the run-up to a very solemn day coming up, the 9th of Av. And this is all still building Jerusalem. The project is not finished. We want young people to be able to afford buying a home in Jerusalem. We want young people who are graduating from the university to understand that they can get a good job here and not have to leave the city. And so until we organize and we get to the point where everybody has the opportunity that they deserve, then we're going to keep building our city.
So thank you. That's great. That's a wonderful, wonderful overview. I hope people will take the opportunity to ask questions about that and other things we're going to discuss. On Tisha B'Av, which begins on Wednesday night and Thursday, we read Lamentations, talking about the sorry state of when Jerusalem was literally destroyed. This year, you've been in Israel now for 19 years. This year, correct me if I'm wrong, arguably Jerusalem has been in its worst situation, its most devoid, and when we read Lamentations this week, it almost will sound more relevant to us this year. Do you feel that? How does that play out in coming into this week for you?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we are facing probably our most serious challenge since the beginning of the establishment of the State of Israel, certainly since the unification of Jerusalem, because 30% of our income is tourism based, and 80% of our tourists are foreign tourists, which means that we've lost a lot in terms of income for our city, work, businesses are going under, because we're living in a very unprecedented era that we never experienced before, even through 2 intifadas, through wars, through all the calamities that befell Jerusalem. There was never a point that people couldn't come to Jerusalem.
Right.
And now is a point that people can't come to Israel. Our skies are closed and we can't receive and welcome people in Jerusalem. And that's something we've never had here. And it's a very strange situation. So economically, we've taken a real hit. Unemployment is high. Businesses are going under. And in the municipality, we're doing everything we can to keep a lifeline with those businesses going. I'm involved at the moment in a very serious campaign to bring in Israeli tourists to Jerusalem, because believe it or not, I'm sure more evangelicals have visited in percentages Jerusalem than the Israelis living in this country. We 4 million Israelis normally leave the country in the summer. This year they won't be going anywhere. Right. And so I want to get a chunk of those people to come to Jerusalem to understand that this is a more beautiful city, a deeper and more historical city than probably any European city that they could go and visit. And there's many surprises, there's many fantastic activities for children. So we've launched a very extensive local tourism campaign to ensure that those businesses they're not going to do well, but at least survive. So that's the bad news with this whole thing. Now, the good news, I'm an optimist, and I think that anybody who's not an optimist should not be a politician, because then you have nothing to offer. And I believe that there were good things that came out of the corona. And the good things were that we felt an amazing sense of solidarity here in the city. We had 15,000 volunteers in our city, working day and night. We had Meals on Wheels going out to 20,000 people a week, most of them elderly Holocaust survivors. We had anybody who was able-bodied who came forward and said, we want to do something. We raised money for, as you know, Jonathan, because you helped us, for food packages for people who, during the Corona lockdown, couldn't either get to food or couldn't afford food. And so, and what happened was that we saw this with everybody in the city, Jews, Arabs, Christian, we all came together to fight the common enemy. And the common enemy was the virus. And I think that's the first time that's ever happened. So on the one hand, yes, we're in bad shape, and please God, we should get back to where we were. But on the other hand, there was an outpouring of kindness and of unity, which gives me hope for what things could be like, even when we're not in an emergency.
So that's excellent point. And I wanted to ask you to juxtapose, you arrived here in 2001, just as the second intifada was beginning, and buses were blowing up and cafes were blowing up. And it was a very scary, stressful, dangerous time here.
That was exactly when I was here. That was exactly when I came. Our families thought we were crazy immigrating to Israel. My mother-in-law didn't talk to us for 6 months. For immigrating to Israel at a time when there was literally urban warfare on the streets here. We had, like you say, buses blowing up, cafes blowing up. It was a very cruel confrontation, because the other side were targeting civilians, citizens, children, elderly people. There was no impute. There was, they would attack anybody and anything they could get their hands on. And so it was a very trying time. But my husband and I just thought there's never going to be a great time. So we might as well go. We believe that we have a common destiny. We believe that after 2,000 years, we are an historically unprecedented time for the Jewish people. And we needed to be a part of it. I wanted to create my family here. I wanted to raise children here. And so we came. But even in those times when I would be home and I would hear an explosion, even in those times, people were defiant and were out and were dining out and going away on holiday and traveling. It's not like today. Here we're facing a completely different enemy. We're facing an enemy that basically we don't know where and when it's going to hit. Can hit anybody, and there's no getting away from it. And so even when people, the restaurants are open, but people are scared. And so these businesses are really on the edge of total disintegration. And it's very, very sad. And this is the difference. And the other difference is that even during the intifada, the two intifadas, we had two sets of people who continued to come to Israel, even though the news was very, very bleak coming from Israel. And there were two groups. One was the Jews, of course, they were coming, what they see as we see as home, and the evangelical Christians, who are real patriots of Israel and kept coming. They didn't care, they were coming. And so, there was movement. Now, even if you want to come, you can't come. And so that is unprecedented. And I think that next year, we're actually going to see a wave of immigration to Israel from Jews all around the world for mainly one reason, because for the first time since the establishment of the state of Israel, when they wanted to come, when they needed Israel, Israel wasn't taking them in if they weren't citizens.
Right.
First time ever. And that's very significant. For Jews who have been brought up with a history of persecution, always knowing that their insurance policy is Israel, to know that you don't have that insurance policy because of some bizarre virus means that next year we're going to see a lot of people moving here, or at least trying to get a passport here.
That's great, thank you. So you began to go into the direction of the next question I wanted to ask you, which is ultimately how we were connected. And I don't remember even who it was, but someone knowing what we do, I do personally, and we do with the Genesis 123 Foundation, building bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel, and you, and that being a major priority of yours. Most of the participants on the chat now, and probably who will see this afterward, are Christian. What message do you want to give to them? Why are they really important? Share your heart about that for a minute, please.
Sure. Look, it's really actually quite heartwarming how the evangelical support is having a real effect. And I'm not just talking about people coming to Israel. Please God, things will get back to normal and evangelical tourism will come back. The pilgrims will come back and they will continue their pilgrimage. And of course, you know, only under Israel can we preserve freedom of worship in this delicate city, Jerusalem. And we're now refurbishing and making better the stops, the different stations of the cross. We're making the old city more accessible so people with wheelchairs can go. And so we're taking this opportunity to improve our infrastructure so that our pilgrims, the evangelical community can come back and things are even better. But it's not that. It's mainly the moral support and the advocacy support and the political support that we get from the evangelical community. You know, Jews need all the friends they can get, and the people who have been steadily there for us for decades now have been the evangelical community. And I'm no fool, and I understand that if Donald Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv after 20 years of the American government saying that they were going to do it, and Donald Trump did it, it's because Mike Pence is standing right by his side. And his base is the evangelical base. And the evangelicals in America make themselves very clear about where they stand with Israel. And that type of lobbying is so valuable to us that I don't know how we can ever repay you for everything that you do for us.
Oh, that's very meaningful. Thank you. I want to ask you one more question, a little more personal, before we get into, and there are a lot, and by the way, I want to apologize to everybody whose questions we don't get to tonight. I'd rather do a part 2 and have you come back than this drag on longer than we promised. Fleur, you grew up, your father was governor of Gibraltar, and if I'm not mistaken, a lord in the House of Lords, correct?
No, he was the Prime Minister of Gibraltar.
Prime Minister of Gibraltar, okay.
And never a lord because he couldn't be in the House of Lords. He lived in Gibraltar, but he was a sir.
I had seen it somewhere, I thought online, that he had the title lord, but thank you. But you have not just a career, but a history in your personal life of community service. And I wanted to, and then you came here and you jumped right in, both professionally, ultimately now what you're doing, and working for the JDC and working for other nonprofits. So my question is, what are the examples? Like tell me about what drove you to ultimately do what you're doing now. And then I'd like you to you're in Jerusalem, so I think we can ask you, of all people, to be a little prophetic. Where do you see yourself and what your accomplishments will be in 5 and 10 and 20 years?
Okay, well, look, I think that to decide willfully that you're going into politics, you have to have either seen it at home or live some type of example or be a little crazy. I think I'm a bit of both. It's a tough arena, politics. You know, you're exposed, you're criticized, and nothing you do is right. So I think you need to have some type of built-in or example or passion, something which is over and above the regular person who just wants to live their lives. And I'm almost jealous of people who just want to live their lives. I always felt that I always felt that I needed to step up to the plate, something that I grew up with, because that's what I saw at home. So my father was a wonderful person. He was the first leader of Gibraltar, the first mayor of Gibraltar, then the first prime minister of Gibraltar. He basically brought democracy to Gibraltar, which was a British colony, and ended up, you know, getting his people self-determination, which is his biggest achievement. And my father was also a very kind person and a very humble person. So whilst normal parents always tell their children how special they are, I always say my parents always told us how not special we were, because they wanted to make sure that we didn't think we were better than anybody else. And that was a big thing in my house, that nobody's better than anybody else. And so I grew up with those two things, an example of a humble, loved leader who spoke to everybody, who listened to everybody, and who was kind to everybody, people who followed him and people who were even his political enemies. He was always kind to everybody. So I had that. And on the other hand, this amazing public service he was doing that was really making a difference in people's lives. My mother was right there with him, so I see my parents as a unit. My parents never encouraged me to join politics, to be a politician. They actually said that they didn't want that for me because they understand what a sacrifice that is for your life. That's why I say I'm jealous of people who just want to live their regular lives. And so I guess that comes from within, in the sense of, I think people do what they see, what their role models are. This is why it's very important for me to role model for little girls, because, you do what you see. If you don't see enough women in these positions, then little girls don't think they can do it. And that's why it's very important to always have, and develop mentorship opportunities and role models. At any given moment, I'm always mentoring at least 3 or 4 young women, because it's important for young women and little girls to look up and say, yes, we could also be the Prime Minister. Now, in terms of my future, I don't want to be the Prime Minister, but I see myself more in a foreign role, because that's my gift. My gift is that I wasn't born here, and therefore I can understand. I was brought up in a majority Catholic country, with Muslim and Hindu friends, and so my added value is the fact that I understand different mentalities. I speak Spanish fluently. I feel like I'm Latin. I'm also British. I combine a lot of different cultures and backgrounds. My mother's Moroccan. I'm a Sephardi Jew. So I believe that that is actually what I bring to the table, and I could bring to the table for Israel in a foreign role, where it be some ambassadorship, ambassador to the UN, or ultimately some type of minister that works with countries abroad. That's where I see myself. But, politics is cruel. Politics is hard. I always believe that, that we're here because God wants us to be where we are. For me, certainly going into politics was a question of God opening a door that I had to walk through because of my nature. And as long as God keeps opening those doors, I'm going to walk through them and step up to the plate. Awesome. And the moment that the door gets closed and I can't climb through a window, I'll know that I have to move on and do something else.
I love that. Thank you. That's nice to be able to offer that personal insight as well. Thank you for sharing that, not just your perspective. And you mentioned the word blessed, but I'll say as a segue to begin taking other people's questions, that we are blessed, we as the state and people of Israel, to have you, and I'm grateful for the privilege of having you as a friend. I want to ask our first question. We've got a lot of them, folks, and we may have to break the rule of 36 minutes, but I want to ask Dr. David Pitcher to come on. He's an advisory board member. You need to turn on your mic. There you are. And he's got the first question, and then he's going to let you answer it, and we'll scroll through the others. We see you. Dave, you there? Go ahead, Dave, you're on. You hear us? Tell you what, I'm not sure, you're in slow motion. It may be a problem with your camera. I'm going to move on, Dave. I hope you hear me. I'm going to move on and take another question until we know that you're there. So you just stay tight, please, or or maybe log off, and there we go. I was going to say, try that. So there are a couple of things, Fleur, there are so many questions. David Welch from Liberty University sent a great question asking, is Jerusalem and Israel in general prepared for the prophesied future influx of Jews from North America? And if so, or not if so, but the follow-up to that is, how can the international Jewish and evangelical communities assist in preparing for a mass aliyah?
So I met with my friend, the head of Nefesh B'Nefesh, Yeshua Fasa, a couple of weeks ago. He told me that the immigration applications have gone up by 400%. And I think I mentioned it earlier. I think Jews, for the first time, who couldn't make it here, started to worry. I think three things happened that are going to cause the rise in immigration. One is that a lot of people didn't feel safe in their countries of origin in terms of the way that the crisis was handled. I think a lot of people felt unsafe. The second thing is that a lot of people realized that, you know what, you don't need an office to work. You can work online, you can work on Zoom. And so it doesn't really matter where in the world you are, you could still find a way to work with your business or whatever it is you do. And the third thing, like I mentioned earlier, for the first time, Jews couldn't make it here and they started to work. So for all those reasons, I believe there's going to be an influx of immigrants. We, the city, have just given a massive building to Nefesh B'Nefesh as custodians of the immigrants that are going to be coming. It's going to be a building that they are managing, but it's a building for all immigrants and all immigrant organizations. And we have to, of course, strategically plan. Speaking to the Jewish Agency, Nefesh B'Nefesh, like I said, other groups that bring in South Americans and Central Americans. We absolutely have to prepare, and we're ready to receive them. I believe that the key is a successful absorption, and we have to focus our efforts on finding these immigrants jobs, the best schools for their children, communities that fit their style and their way of life. And I think we can do all that. We just have to plan ahead.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Ron Beals is in Tyler, Texas. Dr. Beals, he knows Jerusalem intimately. He's spent a lot of time here, and he's also one of our sponsors today from the East Texas Biblical Prophecy Forum. He's got a great question which relates to something that I know you've talked about in the tourism, but also future, whether the High Court will be able to halt the cable car project. I'm assuming he's speaking about the one that's going into the Old City, or will the Ministry of Tourism in the city be able to satisfy the demands for proof of increasing tourism?
I don't think, as the tourism portfolio holder, I've been arguing for this cable car for a long time now. And I'll tell you why. It's very simple, and I don't think it will be complicated. Look, during the non-corona times, we had 150,000 tourists in the Old City every week. That's an incredible number for an area which is 1 kilometer squared, okay? Now, the way people were getting to the Old City was through massive tourist buses that blocked the entrance of the exit at all times. And of course, not talking about the pollution and everything else that comes with tens and tens and tens of buses. We were looking for a green and a practical solution. And the cable car was the least invasive way of getting people into the Old City. Invasive, I mean, you could put a train, but you have to dig tracks up into the Old City. The Antiquities Authority would never let us go anywhere, because every time you dig something in the city, you find a bone or a coin, or a 3,000-year-old city, you can't dig that much. And so the cable car was seen as a green, light infrastructural development project for tourism. The gondolas are very small, so people claiming it's going to ruin the landscape is not true. and just a practical way and a fun way and a touristy way of getting people into the old city. Now, of course, everybody has to turn everything into politics in the city. Everything becomes political. You're undermining my sovereignty. Which sovereignty am I undermining? This city belongs to Israel. We are united. It's not going to be divided and certainly not going to have a capital of Palestine in this city. And so what are we doing? We are creating a way for tourists to get into the old city, which is green and light. And people don't really, I mean, I've been fighting for this for a while. I come from Gibraltar, as you said. In Gibraltar, I grew up with a cable car going over my mother's apartment, and nobody complained about it, and it wasn't a sovereignty thing, and it was not political, it was practical. I'm a practical person and I'm a pragmatist. We need 150,000 people a week in Jerusalem when we have 5 million tourists a year. In 10 years, 5 years, we have 10 million tourists a year. How on earth are we going to get them there? We're going to destroy our streets. We're going to pollute the most beautiful place in the world, the old city. Right. And so this is a justified, I believe we have the numbers to back it up. I hope that the High Court doesn't make a political decision and actually deals with this practically.
Thank you. That's great. That's great. It's also really important because people who've been to Jerusalem can almost picture not the cable car necessarily, but the streets that you're talking about and the congestion. And it's more than just creating a cable car as a new tourist attraction, but a practical solution for when tourism comes back to the way it was. I'm gonna blend two questions, and then I'm gonna ask on behalf of Dr. Pitcher, who was not able to add, and I apologize to everybody, but you're being patient. So I know I broke the rule of 36 minutes already. Blending the actual Corona situation that we're in now. Ken Barron from the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association is asking specifically what's happening with the merchants, the people and whose businesses have been devastated, and perhaps you can speak to that briefly, but also, if you will, juxtapose that, our good friend Lourdes in Florida, who asked a question about rebuilding the temple. Now, you spoke about a cable car, and we're talking, and someone this week said to me something. Oh, my son, he said he's had a rough week. He was just going back to the army. Maybe next year will be better. I said, you don't have a lot of faith. Next year, the temple could already be rebuilt, especially if Fleur is behind it. Can you juxtapose those two areas of the destruction today and the rebuilding, whether it's the temple but it gets into a lot of political and sensitive issues, but see if you can weave that together in an answer before I end on a different note.
I'll start with the easier question, which is the merchants. Look, the merchants have suffered tremendously. We have suspended city taxes for them for 3 months. We have done, like I mentioned earlier, a huge internal tourism campaign, and we have provided free websites for every person who wants a website, and created a mall in Jerusalem called J Mall, j-mall.co.il, to try and create an online mall so that people can still sell their wares. And we've done that. Still not enough to salvage some businesses. I was just at the old city last week. It's very, very, very sad. Merchants are complaining that they're really suffering tremendously. And we're just praying that things get back to normal as soon as possible. We've done as much as we can do, and apart from cutting city taxes and creating online virtual malls, I don't know really what else we could do. We're exploring different options now to create a city coin where we give people incentive to shop in different places, like we can direct traffic. Lots of things in the making, but we're doing as much as we can possibly do in these circumstances. In terms of the temple, look, at the moment in Temple Mount, we have 2 mosques. Now, I'm a big Zionist, and of course I'm an observant Jew. But the most important thing is the value of life. And what we don't want here is a third world war starting because we want to build a temple. And one day, please God, we will build a temple, but we can't be destroying any. We have to lead by example. And even though there was a temple before there was a mosque, we cannot destroy mosques in order to build temples, because that's not what we do. Okay, so please God, when the Messiah comes, or in your case comes back, then we'll talk about how to rebuild the temple. In the meantime, what we have to do is live our lives by the values of the temple, yes, which is, communal activity, respecting diversity, celebrating the things that we can celebrate. And on top of that, I always say that even if we want to rebuild the temple, the bureaucracy in City Hall is so bad that it'll take 20 years to get a permit. So maybe we should start now, actually.
That's wonderful. Okay, thank you for that. That was very candid, and it's nice because I know that that a lot of people who are watching this pray for Israel, pray that we will rebuild Jerusalem completely, and are very sincere about that. So it's good to have that perspective of somebody who sits in City Hall on a daily basis. Last question. It's not up on my screen, but I'm going to paraphrase from Dr. Pitcher, who's unfortunately was unable to get his camera and mic working with us. He's an orthopedic surgeon. He's volunteered in various medical capacities here in Jerusalem before. He's also a member of our advisory board. And he came up with a great question, which is, during this whole Corona situation that we've been in since February, March, for sure March, can you highlight some really outstanding examples of heroism, of people that have inspired you in Jerusalem?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we had so many young people, like 17-year-olds and 16-year-olds volunteering, handing out food packages in every different community, that I'm in general inspired by people that instead of staying home and watching Netflix, which is what everybody else is doing, they decided that they wanted to help others less fortunate than them with their time. And so I'm inspired by the volunteering spirit in this city. We have the most amounts of nonprofit organizations here per capita in Jerusalem than anywhere in the world. Wow. Which means everybody wants to fix the world somehow. And that spirit is something I'm very proud of, connected to. And so the people that I look for inspiration are certainly those young people, especially those young people, young kids who didn't think of themselves as kids normally would, but they thought about others. And those are the people. And in general, I've been inspired by the medical community and the humane way in which they deal with the patients. I'm very proud to live in a country where we don't have the dilemmas of take away the ventilator from an 85-year-old to give it to a 35-year-old, because we're not going to put ourselves in that situation, because a life is a life is a life. And in general, that outlook, those values from our leadership is what inspires me to keep going. And so, sometimes it takes a horrible situation like the COVID to understand, the values of the society that you live in. And I'm very proud of those values.
That's awesome. That's, we've called our program Inspiration from Zion. And I think if only in the last question, but I think the last half hour, and I'm grateful for that, you've really been an inspiration. We're going to call up Linda Chandler now, Pastor Linda Chandler, who's a member of our executive board, to begin to wrap up the program. While she's just coming on, I want to ask people to stay online for a couple of more minutes. We're going to wrap up with announcements and specifically announcement at the end of our next program following this. But Fleur, I want to share with you, other than me having the privilege of knowing you personally and grateful for what you're doing, you're getting great feedback from everybody here on all of the chat possibilities on the chat, on the Q&A, on emails that are popping up on my screen and on my WhatsApp. And you're getting wonderful feedback and gratitude from people who are watching. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Linda.
Hi, I'm so glad. Thank you. You have been an inspiration, and thank you for calling us the real patriots of Israel. That just touched my heart deeply, deeply, and I appreciate that so much. And I have to ask you just real quick, does Nahum mean comfort, your last name?
Lenachem, yes. Nahum was the prophet.
Right.
He's buried actually in Iraq, I think. But it means, yes, it's my husband's name.
I think that's awesome.
I'm a Hassan and he's a Nahum, and I took his name when I got married.
Sounds good to me. Well, I want to just say that today we want to say in honor of you and the work that you're doing and everything, we're going to take an offering, give everybody a chance to, this is a free thing. It's all done because we love Zion. And we want to invite everybody, though, if they want to make an offering, to bless the most needy residents of Jerusalem by through providing hot meals and monthly care packages, that they can go to www.genesis123.co. It's on your screen right now, and then hit Feed the Hungry. There's a link in the middle of the page. You can do that. And I have personally, oh, that's me up there. I've personally worked with that when I got to go to Run for Zion over a year ago. And I just want to invite anybody that would like to make a donation. That would be an awesome thing for you to do today, just in the honor of Fleur and what she's done. And she's just so vocal about comforting and inspiring people like she's done for us today. And we just thank her for that. And so at this time, I'm going to offer a closing prayer. And I will try not to do a revival right now. I'm kidding. I really want to read from the Psalms 122, because I think it's appropriate to pray over the city and the city of David as he did. And it says this, and I'm just going to ask the God Almighty to listen to our prayer today, that we are glad when they said to me, the house of the Lord, let's go. Our feet were already standing at your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built as a city, fostering friendship and unity. The tribes have gone up there, Lord, the tribes of Adonai, as a witness to Israel, to give thanks to the name of Adonai. For there the thrones of justice are set up, and the thrones of the house of David. We pray today, according to this, for the shalom in Jerusalem. May those who love you prosper. May shalom be within your ramparts and prosperity in your palaces. For the sake of my family and the family of Christians that are united here with our Jewish brothers and sisters, I say to you today, shalom be within you. For the sake of the house of Adonai our God, I seek all people's well-being. And then I say to you, Hashem, all glory, honor, and praise. And I thank you for the honor of my Jewish brothers and sisters producing our Messiah, Yeshua, a great Jewish rabbi and friend to all. We love you, and we say amen and amen. Thank you today.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're just going to wrap up with a couple of announcements. Lee, there we go. Thank you so much, Lee, for putting that up. So I want to invite everybody. We don't have a link live yet for it, but the next Inspiration from Zion program is going to be no less incredible than this, with the special advisor to America's ambassador in Israel, Rabbi Aryeh Lightstone, speaking about how U.S. diplomacy is leading the world in Israel. And actually, we didn't get to talk much about that and the moving of the embassy today, but we will get to that on the 12th of August. And everybody who's here, stay tuned for the invitation to that. We also, again, thanking our sponsors of this program, the Atlanta Israel Coalition, East Texas Biblical Prophecy Forum and Host Ministries. Others who wish to step up can email me privately and join us as sponsors as well. I'm seeing how blurry I am on the screen. I apologize for that. And lastly, anyone who's a parent or a grandparent and has children that they like to connect with Israel in a way that's really beautiful, meaningful, and age appropriate, I encourage you to visit our website, genesis123.co, to get a sense of all of the programs that we're talking about. But specifically, we have a great program called Verses for Zion, where we're inviting children to study 72 biblical verses that relate to Israel and have various incentives. You can go and read all about that. But everybody, it's we're over time, and I would apologize for that if this had been something that I didn't think was great and not a tremendous use of your time and inspiration that I pray that it was. And I'm grateful again, Fleur, for you joining us, for our board members and advisory board members who have joined us tonight, and for everybody who's logged in, who should be sleeping in Australia and Malaysia and Pakistan, and who now needs to get back to work in North America and everyone in between. So from Jerusalem until August 12th, blessings. Everybody should have a safe and meaningful fast this week. And if you're not familiar with that, and if that's not your tradition, you can certainly spend some time reading Lamentations and connecting with the destruction and now the rebirth of Jerusalem. God bless you, and thank you all.